Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, you are a very obedient class. Eh? So we had to wait for the instruction. I thought someone was going to tell us that. Good evening, everyone, distinguished guests, colleagues, students that are with us this evening, members of the University of Cape Town community, all colleagues from the Faculty of Health Sciences, and everyone who has joined us this evening, including those who will be joining us, I guess, online. My name is Professor Majosi, the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Internationalization here at UCT. It is indeed a great honor and a privilege to welcome you to this inaugural lecture by Professor Maritz Laubscher. And this evening brings us here to recognize an important milestone in his academic career and to celebrate his appointment to the professoriate in this institution. I would like to extend a special welcome to Professor Laubscher's family, his wife, Balodin. Yes. His children, Mia and Marco. His parents, Kobas and Annemarie. His mother-in-law, Marietta Kotze. His sister and brother-in-law, Anchen and Francois Ritif. And his sister and brother-in-law, Cherise and Stephen Lapé. An occasion such as this is never an individual achievement. It takes a family to build this. Behind every academic career, there are family members, there are friends, there are colleagues, there are mentors, there are students who provide support, encouragement, and perspective. So we are delighted that Professor Laubscher's family is here to share this occasion with him. But at this point, let me also recognize the platform party, the procession that you saw coming in. Professor Robert Dunn, the head of division of orthopedic surgery, who will introduce at the right time Professor Laubscher. Professor Michael Held, the consultant orthopedic surgeon at Groote Hospital, who will offer the vote of thanks. Professor Lionel Green Thompson, the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, who will make the closing remarks at the end. So inaugural lectures hold a special place in the life of a university. They allow us to recognize academic achievement, but they also give scholars an opportunity to reflect on their work, to reflect on their questions that have shaped their careers and the contribution they hope their scholarship will ultimately make. Professor Laubscher's lecture this evening, titled Stronger Together, Research and a Clinician is a Team Sport, offers a fitting reflection on the nature of academic and clinical work. The idea of research as a team sport speaks to something fundamental about how knowledge is created and how healthcare advances. Progress really comes from one person working in isolation. It really comes from one person working alone. It comes from people bringing different forms of expertise to a shared problem, challenging one another's thinking, learning from experience, and working towards a common purpose. As the late South African Anglican bishop, theologian, anti-apartheid and human rights activist, Archbishop Desmond Tutu once reminded us, my humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together, quote unquote. That principle resonates strongly with clinical research. The challenges facing healthcare are complex, and they rarely fit neatly within the boundaries of a single discipline. They require clinicians, researchers, nurses, allied health professionals, patients, and communities to bring their knowledge and experience to the same table. For clinicians in particular, the challenge is often to balance demanding responsibilities to patients with the time and attention required for research. Collaboration can help bridge that gap. It allows expertise and responsibility to be shared while creating opportunities to ask better questions and find practical solutions to difficult problems. This is particularly important in our country and across the continent, where healthcare professionals often work in settings where resources are limited and the burden of disease and injury is significant. In such contexts, research must remain connected to the realities of patients and health systems. Universities, therefore, have an important role to play in bringing people together around these challenges. Here at UCT, we want our research to address real problems, strengthen our communities, and contribute to better outcomes locally, nationally, and globally. And this ambition is reflected in our strategy 2030 and our commitment to strengthening UCT's contribution to the public good. As a leading African research university, we have a responsibility not only to generate knowledge, but to ask how that knowledge can improve lives and help address the challenges facing our society. Healthcare provides perhaps one of the clearest examples of why this matters. Research can change how we understand injury and disease, how we train healthcare professionals, how we deliver care, and how we allocate scarce resources. However, its greatest value is realized when knowledge translates into better outcomes for patients. Professor Laubscher's work sits firmly within this space, bringing clinical practice and research together around important questions in orthopedic care and trauma. This evening, however, gives him an opportunity to step back from the day-to-day demands of clinical and academic life and reflect more broadly on what it means to build a research career as a clinician. His lecture title also reminds us that teamwork is not simply about having several people involved in a project. It's about building relationships in which people share expertise, listen to different perspectives, support one another, and take collective responsibility for the outcome. Those principles matter across the university. They matter in our research groups, our hospitals, our classrooms, and our partnerships with communities and institutions beyond ours. Professor Laubscher, your appointment to the professoriate represents recognition of your contribution to orthopedic surgery, research, and the academic life of this institution. We are proud to celebrate this achievement with you and with your family, with your colleagues, with your collaborators, all of whom have supported you along the way. To Balodin, Mia, Mayo, Gobas, Annemarie, Marietta, Anchen, Francois, Cherise, and Stephen, to all those who have worked alongside Professor Laubscher, thank you for being part of this journey and for sharing this special occasion with us. So Professor Laubscher, again, congratulations on this significant milestone. We look forward to hearing your reflections this evening and to engaging with the ideas and experiences you will share with us. It is now my pleasure to invite Professor Dunn to introduce Professor Laubscher. Thank you and welcome again to this evening of scholarship, reflection, and celebration. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As I introduce Professor Maritz Laubscher, I choose to present the person rather than the CV. I met this rather remarkable man in 2009 when he joined our department as a junior registrar. You might recognize some of these people from a long time ago. He immediately impressed me with his knowledge, his work ethic, and general commitment, in many ways, far more than simple service delivery. He was clearly a team player, immediately engaging all departmental, social and sporting activities, here running with the pack at an annual National Orthopaedic Congress. His competitive nature allowed the registrars to win Charnley's Ashes in that year at the annual consultant registrars cricket match, a rare event with a usually star-studded consultant lineup. He did very well as a trainee, being awarded the Best Registrar of the Year prize along the way, and he impressed me with seemingly effortlessly collating my primary spine tumor data and publishing it with no fuss, unlike the usual drag-along process I'm used to with the other registrars. He went on to graduate the College of Medicine, obtaining the Edelstein Medal. Now, this medal is no mean feat. It is awarded to the top exam candidate of the year, so it's over 2 exams, and the mark has to be above 75%, otherwise it's not awarded. So it brings great pride to our department and university when our candidates get that. Early on, he decided on a musculoskeletal trauma career and spent a year under the mentorship of Brian Bernstein, who's in the audience, and the Cape Trauma Orthopedic Group at Vincent Pallotti, where we collaborate. He then went on to London, to Royal National Orthopedic Hospital, where some of our other staff have also trained, and he trained under Peter Caldwell and team to gain further lower limb reconstructive skills. Here he is with Mr. Catterall, a father of pediatric orthopedic surgery. I already regarded him as a huge potential asset to our team and used the 2 years he was away to orchestrate a post to accommodate him. The Machiavellian is me, not him. I cannot divulge how, but let's just say I used the principle of the end justifies the means. His calm but energetic presence was immediately felt when he put his heart and soul into all domains of our department's practice. This resulted in increasing accolades, here receiving a prize at the South African Orthopedic Association Congress, and increased profile with lecture requests. Maritz is our IT guru. Not much visibly upsets him, but don't unplug the PC projector setup. He was an early adopter of video presentation, pre-Zoom, pre-COVID, and converted us, along with others, to the Adobe Connect software the university had at the time. And we got our postgraduate teaching platform out available to all that wanted to participate nationally and beyond. This put us in great stead to maintain function when COVID hit. An example of his holistic approach to patient care and departmental advancement was Mask Heroes, where he and his wife Bolladin and some others initiated masks far before the national global drive. At that point, we've been told no, masks didn't matter. They arranged the manufacture and fundraised to provide staff with these masks. He was also a proponent of the Ubuntu box pioneered by Professor Roche, also in the audience, and the biomechanical lab, which allowed, you can see an example of Professor Kruger swabbing from safety. Maritz is an excellent surgeon with a great understanding of the fundamentals and literature base. Practicing evidence-based medicine is a rarity in many surgical domains. He's a great mentor and teacher in and out of theatre. I've learned a lot from him, sitting in our Tuesday lunchtime postgraduate clinical exam prep meetings over the last 10 plus years have been around. He is a leader in low limb deformity management and shares his skills widely. Here he is in Mauritius, supporting one of our previous supernumerary trainees, Panchu, performing the surgery there, and over here, the Cape Western Branch meeting. He has an illustrious academic career, 120 plus academic papers. Next time in your CV, I think number them. I gave up counting. Along with his wingman, Professor Makungu, he has attracted international research grants and collaboration. They employ a postgrad researcher and research nurses, something unheard of in most African orthopedic settings. He was selected to represent South Africa as part of the American British Canadian Fellowship, where a South African joins English, New Zealand, and Australian surgeons and travels to North America, about 13 centers in US and Canada, to showcase our research and interact with the colleagues. He has served on the College of Medicine Orthopedic Constituent Council, and for his sins is the incoming president, despite, after watching me, swearing he never would. He has followed the department's tradition of subspecialty fellowships and created his own, sourcing funding and raising the skill level in lower limb reconstruction nationally. He deputized for part of my sabbatical last year, keeping the ship facing forward, and made the hard decisions required, confirming his ability to fill in his shoes. I look forward to He has done all of this whilst maintaining a great social balance, a regular at all our functions. He drives a ridiculous Movember, advocating for male health, and competes for the best MO every year, best Mo. As you can see, when he's a little bit light, he gets onto bra duty. He and Baladin turn up for the medical 10 where we compete, and he just loves winning at golf. And then there are the annual boys' weekends, golf and motorcycles. So this is my office. Worry about showing this. I think it's bigger than the dean's, but anyway. Maritz and my office are adjacent to each other, and that door, I actually got my secretary to take this picture this morning while I was flying in, and that's the interleading door between Maritz and my office. And it's like a bidirectional swing door. We are forever walking in and through this door to touch base, bounce ideas, have a frustrated moan, find solutions. Like me, Maritz suffers from the R gene, that's responsibility, and will not let anything slide, irrespective of the amount of effort required. While I enjoy a full frontal assault, Maritz is more nuanced, gently nudging. He frequently nudges me while maintaining great respect, but still a nudge. Often it's a good nudge, and I appreciate that, Maritz. However, more recently, Maritz tells me I'm getting soft, especially with my accommodation of registrar leave and rotation requests. So I gave him the portfolio. I look forward to playing less bad cop now, Maritz, and letting you develop your enforcer role. So Maritz, thanks for all the support, airtime, good ideas, and the effort you put to optimize our function for the patients and trainees' benefit. I look forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So maybe I just want to start off by thanking Kelly for organizing, or the organization for the evening, and for Melissa for the snacks later, and then also for Rob and for Lydia for the support. I really struggled to decide what I was going to talk about. For everyone that knows me well, knows that I've got a big passion for all sports, every sport really, but specifically rugby, which I think is the most beautiful, or the best sport. So I decided to not miss the opportunity to talk about one of my passions, which is sport. So this is the slide that I always show when I talk to show where I'm from, Cape Town, and Grooteskier Hospital there at the foot of Devil's Peak. But this is where I was born, so I've just put a map there for the Cape Townians, Bloemfontein, where I'm originally from, and just to show that the Western Cape is not the only pretty place in the country. There's the beautiful savannas of the Free State. So the Springbok teams have showed us that a diverse group of people with dedication, what they can achieve under the leadership of Rassie Erasmus and Siya Kolisi. And for me, one of the best things about rugby is there's not many professional sports where you can both have Eben Etzebeth and Cheslin Colby in the same team and each have their own role. And there's even space for these guys, right? And they're actually good at what they're doing. So there's a lot of lessons to learn from team sport. And so basically in clinical medicine as well, a multidisciplinary team approach has been shown in many complex situations to be beneficial. In infection, which I treat a lot of patients, and patients treated in the MDT environment has been shown to have better outcomes. It's the same in research. So I'm first and foremost a clinician, I must say, always been, and that's my first passion. This was our first publication. I worked as a MO in George, and we saw a patient with a pathological fracture with hydatid disease of his humerus. So then I was really amazed of how little was available and written about it. And did some research on how we should treat the patient, and then me and my fellow MOs, my first research team, wrote it up as a case study and to review of the literature. So this is where it always really started, and also where my interest in bone infections started. So I joined the division of orthopedic surgeons, and these guys were the sort of leaders of the department at the time, Rob, Steve, and Mike Solomons. They were really at the top of their field, and I sort of admired their clinical skills and their good surgery. But they also taught us the importance of collecting data and looking at one's own results. So I was definitely a reluctant researcher, I would say, but there's nothing that sort of get an orthopedic surgeon into life like a bit of competition. So we have the tradition on our division that if you have a presentation at the annual conference, you get sponsored to go, you miss a week of work. It's a big party, or I should say that last is an academic stimulating week, and then importantly, you don't stay behind and do all the work, right? So my initial main aim was to just make sure that I go to the conference every year and have a couple of papers. And I did at least one paper with each of these guys. And as Rob would say, he'd probably say it's my best publication, looking at his primary bone tumor. But I still think it's the first lesson that I would take away is that for surgery, there's a great value in audit. Surgery is not a medication, and you need to look at your own results, know your own results, and why it provides a low level of evidence. It's essential for surgical practice. So Michael Held was one of my early research partners, and Michael came from Germany. He wasn't attracted by the orthopedics. That's what didn't bring him to Cape Town. But we sort of ended up forging a early research partnership, and we really stumbled upon this project that eventually became his PhD. So while we were the spine registrars and we did a spine biopsy, and the next morning the lab results came back and it said gene expert positive TB, RIF sensitive TB. And we were amazed because we usually waited 4 or 5 weeks for TB cultures. We contacted the lab and asked them, what is this? This was just the time when the gene expert was rolled out as for diagnosis of pulmonary TB, and they said, no, they're very sorry, they made a mistake. This is for sputum only, and we should just ignore the result. But we were like, okay, well, this may be onto something, and we convinced the lab to start doing gene experts on the tissues. That eventually became Michael's PhD, and it really revolutionized the way that we diagnose TB spine. So this is the second lesson, to utilize your lucky breaks, basically. So I had the privilege to go do a fellowship in the UK when I finished to the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital. This was very exciting. This was the early days of intramedullary lengthening nails. I had the privilege to follow up and look at the cases that had femoral lengthening with intramedullary nail by my boss and compare them to the traditional X-fix, showing a much better experience to the patient. I came back to Cape Town, and South Africa is a special place where we have access to some of sort of the high income country resources, but our system is really overburdened. So we constantly have to make a decision of who we're going to operate on. We can't just operate on people because we want to or because we can. And that puts us in a special position to be able to teach these lessons to the rest of the world. So Rob and Michael started our orthopedic research unit to really streamline our sort of research output, increase our research output. So Michael came up with some sexy names for each one of our research streams, like orthoballistics for gunshots, and GOGO for our focus on fragility fractures in the elderly, and MUTI for our TB research. So just a few highlights of the early research. So, in South Africa, we constantly have to do more with less, and I quite enjoy that, to show other people that we can do that successfully. And here we showed with that we can safely reuse the components of external fixation, something that's not standard practice around the world, that we do, saving a lot of money without any complications. We developed our own antibiogram for the treatment of bone and joint infections for our choice of empiric antibiotics. Previously, this was all based on international guidelines and not on any local evidence. And we also adapted international guidelines. One of the problems of international guidelines, it's often out of reach for lower resource settings. You need to do so many of this and this investigations and simply things that's not available. So we've adapted some of our international guidelines to be fit for a lower resource setting and infection. And we also showed that we can achieve the same results from the developed world or the high income setting in a lower income setting, as we repeated our intramedullary lengthening nail study here across a couple of countries in a lower resource setting, and showed that we can achieve the same results. So that was the next lesson. So we can do more with less, proudly South African. So Tombu really revolutionized our trauma care and our research output in our department. So just to give the non-orthopods a sort of a look into orthopedic trauma. So orthopedic trauma historically is something that you do a lot of as a registrar. By the end of your registrar time, everyone's so hopeful they moved into some elective field, but then the sort of punishment is sort of distributed equally. So everyone has to do some trauma calls. So Tombu changed that, and we set up a dedicated trauma unit and really improved our trauma care, but also our trauma research output. So one of the avenues that we targeted for research is gunshots. So people will ask, why are we so interested in gunshots? Well, the answer is because we have to. This is, you could just see here from some news headings and TV that we see so many gunshots that we have to. So you can see here in one day earlier this year in Cape Town, 7 people were killed in gang-related and incidents. Of course, we're not so interested in the people that skilled because they end up in the morgue, but it's been shown for every person that's killed, there are often multiple injured, and those are the ones that end up in our trauma units. So we see a lot of gunshots, and this is a common patient. You can see here in our morning meeting, multiple gunshots sustained. So for the non-orthopods, again, this is a typical gunshot that we see low velocity from a handgun. Technically, it's an open fracture because it's a communication from the outside to the wound to the fracture. But if you follow the normal principles of treating an open fracture and debride this, you often end up, losing a lot of these little bone fragments, and you end up with a bone defect that's much harder to treat. So, but if you simply bypass the bony fragments of an intramedullary nail, it often leads to uneventful union. So we came up with our sort of so-called South African approach, where we initially resuscitate the patient with the focus on circulation, because bleeding is what kills patients, and then except for a single shot of antibiotics, basically treating the gunshots like closed fractures. This is quite out there, and is sort of against a lot of the teaching in the high income settings. But our guidelines was not necessarily based on high levels of evidence, but more sort of out of necessity. And our gunshot stream of research has been extremely successful, and we've had many publications with basically gunshots of every bone. You wouldn't believe it. Okay. The next person that came along was Simon, and I must say, Simon Graham, is that we can't take any credits. We didn't find Simon. Simon found us. So Simon approached us to do his PhD with us to look at another sort of neglected group of patients and look at fracture healing in HIV positive patients. So at the time, the evidence reported in the literature was that HIV is a risk factor for bone not healing or for a non-union. This wasn't really based on high levels of evidence, but this is what was written in the textbook, and it even led to people with HIV being treated in a different way for their fractures. So this was Simon's PhD project that he came here. He sort of convinced us that he can do it here, and we agreed. What was important that for the first time he gave us some funding from the Wellcome Trust. That was our first experience of doing some funded research. We recruit across ourselves and Tygerberg all patients treating with an intramedullary nail. As you can see here, a high number of patients over 14 months, 400 patients with 442 nails. 71 of them were HIV positive, and we basically showed that HIV was not a risk factor for delayed or non-union. So against the thoughts at the time, we also look at infection, even though HIV is a risk factor for other opportunistic infections, not necessarily for orthopedic fracture-related infection. So why was the study so successful? Well, the first thing I would say is that we had a fantastic team. We all got on very well. The second thing is we had, with the funding, we employed 2 research nurses, Nusipo and Nomsik in the bottom. So for the first time, we had some non-clinicians in our research team, and we achieved a 90% follow-up rate at 12 months for a large group of patients. It also showed that we can achieve sort of a comparable clinical outcomes to high income setting, despite, as you can see here, we had 442 nails, 435 of them done by trainees, mostly in the middle of the night. And this was one of the registrars who was the top nailer. He did 67 nails in 14 months, which whenever I show this slide at international meetings, everyone's always like gasping, because those are crazy numbers. So we showed that HIV is not a risk factor for bone not healing. So that was good for us because basically it could show that we could achieve high follow-up rates with clinical studies over a long time and achieve comparable outcomes to higher income settings. So another thing that Simon taught us is that every study should have a cool acronym name, and otherwise the research won't be successful. So through further collaboration with Oxford, we borrowed from Bruce Picard's ASOS study, which really impressed us, and we wanted to see if we can do a similar multi-center study in orthopedic trauma. We decided to focus on gunshots and came up with the GRID study. One of the problems is that it's estimated that only 60% of the gunshots we see are basically reported to the police. So if you use police statistics for looking at the number of gunshots, it's grossly underreported. So Cape Town is a dangerous city, as you can see here, and you really have to look at Central and South America to find cities with a higher homicide rate, and many of these homicides are through gunshots. Despite the many gunshots that we see, I mean, this is an old picture. Hopefully it will change a little bit now. The majority of the literature guiding treatment of gunshot fractures in humans are from North America and from a military setting. So we decided that we want to try and change that. So we had some further partners joining our team from the UK and specifically from Oxford. And we got 37 orthopedic units across the country representing all 9 provinces to recruit gunshots, basically showing a crazy amount of 3,500 gunshot fractures being treated in orthopedic units across South Africa per year. So you can see here the gunshots mostly focused around the large centers. All the provinces were represented. The gunshot victims are mostly young males, low unemployed or low level of education, and what's quite surprising to see the high percentage that were previously involved in interpersonal violence. Basically, every bone in the body got shot, and we showed as well when we looked at some outcomes. And this is, as I said, high levels of unemployment among the gunshot victims, previous arrest, and 43% of them were either stabbed or shot or both before. And worryingly, only a third of the gunshots were reported to the police, which raised the question if there's an opportunity for social intervention while the patients are in the hospital. So we showed that we could basically work as a collaborative network across South Africa, and we confirmed the high incidence in gunshot fractures. We decided to take it a little bit further, and we started the Orthopedic Research Collaborative in Africa, or ORCA, another acronym as Simon taught us. And the reason for this collaboration was to basically try and increase the research output across low and lower income countries, so both low and low middle income countries in Africa. To get back to our gunshots, so as I said, basically our sort of South African approach was based not necessarily on high levels of evidence, but more out of necessity. So we decided with some more funding and some more collaboration and bringing a few more team members on board that we're going to try and clinically determine whether our approach, the South African approach, leads to acceptable outcomes in treating gunshots as close fractures. So we continued to recruit to our nailing database for the host study, recruiting more gunshots and open fractures, just to show what a challenging group of patients these are. to follow up. We had a 10% loss to follow up rate at 12 months, was quite acceptable. But of the patients lost to follow up, you can see, 8 patients were murdered within the follow up period, 7 from another gunshot, or one being stabbed. So we showed that with our sort of South African approach, we can achieve similar infection rate and union rates compared to closed fractures. So basically justifying our approach, even controlling for other variables that could affect infection or union. And our close fracture approach can achieve similar infection and union rates. So basically justifying our approach and providing higher levels of evidence to what we previously had available. Now, these are the most 2 important members of our orthopedic research unit. Robin, who's our research coordinator, she previously joined us as a PhD student and a postdoc, and Sipu, our senior research nurse. What we also learned is that the bigger your team grows, the more money you need, right? So it's a little bit of a problem. So we had to look everywhere for different sources of funding. And this was an interesting experience for me anyway, participating in a surgical randomized controlled trial. So we've had some previous randomized controlled trials where patients are randomized to no surgery or to urgent surgery or delayed surgery. But this was telling the surgeon which operation to do for a distal tibia, and 2 quite radically different treatments. So patients were recruited and randomized to having either an external fixator or a plate inserted for their fracture. Now, as surgeons, and the medics rips us off about it, we always believe we're right? And it is unfortunately an important part of surgical practice, because I think if you don't believe you're doing the right thing, it would be crazy to cut someone open if you don't believe that you're doing the right thing. So anyway, this is quite interesting, being told what operation to do by randomization. So we were the largest. So we were the first international site to join the UK multi-center study and recruited the highest number of patients to the study, and basically showing that the internal fixation group had a higher complication rate, but both groups achieved similar outcomes. So the lesson learned here was by myself and Graham is that we can be told what to do, right? So patients were randomized. Graham did all the platings, I did all the external fixators, and you were sometimes had to do an operation where you would have thought in the back of your mind that it's something else, but it was a very good learning experience. So we decided to go even bigger. Sort of orthopedic surgery develops in 2 different parts. The one is the sort of state-of-the-art technological developments, new implants, new procedures, which is fantastic and I fully endorse, but it often has a very limited benefit to a very small group of people if you look across the world. And then there's a large group of people that have really don't have access to even basic, safe orthopedic surgical care, and that's where one can make an almost bigger difference. So we started the Global Injury Group, mainly focusing on research specifically on global surgery in orthopedics. So, and our main overall aim was to improve the outcomes for musculoskeletal injuries, but also to improve the research output across it. So, and why is it so important? Well, musculoskeletal injuries are the biggest killer of young people, and Sub-Saharan Africa have the highest burden of musculoskeletal injuries from anywhere in the world. So our group, as you can see, our teams grew much bigger. And with Oxford in the lead and our collaborators in Malawi and Tanzania, we 2 years ago successfully received an NIHR grant of £4 million, of which just under £1 million or 20 million rand came to our research unit, which is by far, I know it's small change for ID and some of the other research centers or units in the university, but for us, it's by far the biggest amount of funding that we've received. These are all our collaborators. And this is our sort of local clinician and non-clinician team in South Africa. It's a 4-year project of which we different work packages. We initially just looked at the at musculoskeletal research output across Sub-Saharan Africa and look at what are the challenges and barriers to that. We're in the middle of looking at the incidence of musculoskeletal injuries. We identified 5 landmark injuries, the long bones, ankles and forearms. And in the first study we recruited 3,000 patients across South Africa, and by far the biggest sort of orthopedic trauma study performed in South Africa. And the second window has just started, and this is giving us a lot of data that we will still show. So how do we get the orthopedic units to participate? We have managed to get 47 out of 59 public orthopedic hospitals in South Africa to recruit patients, while a little bit of competition again. And here you can see is the leaderboard showing Frere Hospital in the Eastern Cape as the top. Nothing like a little bit of competition to get the orthopods going. And we've got some excellent data of the incidents, whether the fractures are open or closed, the distribution of the mechanism, and also how they are treated across South Africa and Tanzania, and more will come. We're going to look at the resources available to manage these injuries, and then working up towards the last year, running a randomized control trial across all 3 countries. So to watch that space. And our overall aim is really to, in the 5 years, have a advanced research network across Africa with a high research output, but also to improve the care of patients with musculoskeletal injuries across South Africa. And this is our team that's grown a lot since we started. Here we go. So as I said, you definitely can't do research as a clinician without a team. And yeah, thank you very much to everyone that contributed. Now, it's not just the research team that contributes. We are sort of clinical, non-research team. A few thank yous as well. This is our D10 staff in theatre. Now, we can't do research without content, right? So we need the surgery to be able to do the research. So thank you for all their contributions. Our admin staff in the department, our clinic staff, everyone else in the division that I haven't mentioned previously. Thank you very much to them. We also have an amazing team at our private practice, at Cape Orthopedic Trauma Group. Thank you very much to everyone there for their help and basically to enable us to have the time for the other outputs. Also, our dedicated bone and joint infection unit team at Vincent Pallotti. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to them.
This brings me to the part of my speech where I might not be able to trust my voice, hence the recording. There's a few special groups of people here this evening that I would like to say thank you to. My oldest group of friends whom I've known from university or intern days. I specifically said nothing about them through this evening. They have a lot of ammunition to hit back with. That's why I'm leaving them alone, and please don't believe anything that they say about our earlier years at university, internship, and so forth. Thank you to my mother-in-law and my in-laws for their support and tolerating my absence at many family get-togethers. Thank you to my family who's all present here this evening, especially my mum and dad, who made a lot of sacrifices through their lives to give us the opportunities we've had. Thanks to my 2 sisters. We're a family of medics, and they're both in the medical field. Anshin left clinical medicine and is the medical director of the Netcare group, and Cherise is an anaesthetist in private practice and at Red Cross Children's Hospital. I always say that I'm the black sheep in the family because I just made it to orthopedics. They were always much cleverer than me, studied much harder than me, and got into a lot less trouble. Thank you to Aggie and Lorraine, who's also here this evening. They are our support network at home, and without them we will be unable to do all the things that we do. Thank you to my children, Mia and Marku. Thank you for understanding when I'm not home, when I work late and sometimes get home after bedtime. And thanks for forgiving me when I miss some sports matches. Thank you. And then lastly, to my amazing wife, Paladine, without whom I would definitely not be able to do all these things. Thanks for always supporting me and tolerating all the time I spend at work, late nights, and not always being there to participate in household activities.
Thank you very much. And actually, this is not the most important thing that's happening this week. There's a very important rugby match happening on Saturday, and just want to remind everyone what can happen when a team work together.
Looking for the steal here, right at the end of this test match. But it's over! It's over! It's a full Rugby World Cup for South Africa.
So let's hope for the same outcome on Saturday. enjoy the rugby.
Okay, so I will then call upon Professor Michael Held to give the vote of thanks. But please, if you may remain seated after the vote of thanks, we will then have the Dean of the faculty giving us the closing remarks shortly after the vote of thanks. Michael.
Thank you very much, Maritz, for this beautiful presentation of all you've done. And also just from us all, just congratulations on your professorship, on your promotion. I think you can see all these people here. They're just your friends, your family, your colleagues. They're all behind you, and they're all kind of thankful for all the hard work that you do every day. So from all of us, congratulations. But as you said, this is definitely not your biggest achievement, and I want to talk to you about some of the other things that Maritz does. And I did speak to some of your intern friends. So Maritz is an adventure seeker. He loves adrenaline. He's an adrenaline junkie. And so any water sport, board sport, going through deserts with his wife on a motorcycle, he'll be right in the middle of that. So he's someone that really looks for more than just work. And the DNA is a Laubscher DNA. It runs in the family. You can see Paladin and him have done the recent High Rocks, and I think won. It looks like you're on the there was no second and third place, but they were definitely. And also, you can see Mia in the back. She's just shouting, faster, faster. And obviously going through all the jungle gyms and all the ninja stuff with Marco. But you know, it's also an achievement to just make it into the rotation. You have to go through quite a lot of trouble. This is him working on his Dutch courage on the left, on the right. This guy's trying to convince him to do general surgery, and he luckily managed. He's getting pinned down on some golf weekend. So they've been working on him quite a bit, but he's exploring different worlds as well. But it's in Paladin, worlds that many orthopedic surgeons will never know. Any opportunity to have a look at different fashion or color schemes, and Maritz and Paladin are always there. And it also did something for our department because we got into basically in touch with ourselves. Found ourselves a little bit more following our dreams and our imagination. You can see here in the middle between Maritz and De Priya is our professor of hand surgery. He actually he actually gave me the picture as well. So these are not AI generated pictures. And on the right, you can see Pete Polly in the middle. He's a spine surgeon, a respected spine surgeon. And on the bottom, you can see Professor Makungo, our head of the trauma unit, is also obviously. So he's brought in that feel for in our department to just be more than you just your work. So De Priya and Maritz actually took me under their wing at Jooste Hospital. They were running Jooste Hospital as MOs. There was no consultant there. And they taught me the basics of orthopedics in a very simple, beautiful way, in an Afrikaans way. Because everything was in Afrikaans. So they'd be like, Tannie, je been het gebreek. Ons moet nou reg mag. 'n skroefietjie aansit. And so I was loving it, running behind them and just feeding off the energy. And this one evening, I was standing in front of this abdomen, bloated abdomen, quite a lot of stab wounds. The anesthetic team was nervous. The patient was decompensating. And Maritz was staying behind because the consultants took a long time to get into the hospital. And so I started with the skin, then subcutaneous tissue. I did some bleeding, some of the small skin bleeders. I tried to cauterize that. And I said, Michael, no. Let's do it the South African way. Put his finger into the belly, into the fascia, put his knife around, upside down, and just went. Whoosh. He said, Michael, you sometimes have to just skin it like a snook. And then I realized there's a lot more than you learn in medical school that this guy knows. So he's obviously gone a lot of hunting trips, and he's processing. And later on, I found out from his parents that he was completely looking at all the anatomy, all the organs. He was dissecting them, trying to figure out where the nerves going, where the arteries going. And his knife skills became better and better, even before he went to university. So he was actually already, the hands were already working before he was even a surgeon. And there's a lot of South African hunters that have got a similar approach, but it actually grounds them very much in the surgery. And Maritz, and also what you saw in this talk was he's grounded and he's amplified his value by putting research into that. So his research and also his training basically made this valuable thing that he does, not just two hands working, but a whole system around that. And that's very special. That doesn't exist that often. It also helps me to have someone like Maritz or Sitombo that are world experts in trauma surgery and all the complications you can get with it. These are all just WhatsApp messages of me to Maritz, and I'm sure there's many of you that have got even bigger lists to him. So he's our advisor. He comes in when when something hits the fan, and he helps out. And this is a huge help for us, not just academic help, but just being around. So we finally got into the reg rotation. We went through trauma, and now we're getting to elective surgery. So it's just beautiful, less blood, and more focus on just structure, and we're getting to his main rotation that he loves so much is pediatric orthopedic surgery. There's a Professor Hoffman there, and so we go to our outreach clinic in Worcester. Maritz, I'm the junior, so I have to sit in the back. Maritz is the senior. I'm trailing him every 3 months. I'm behind him 3 months. So every time I'm hearing about how good this guy is, and I'm learning from him. But my ego obviously is also taking strain. But him and Prof Hoffman are just chatting away about rugby, and I'm thinking, this guy, they're friends. Prof Hoffman knows everything about Maritz, where he went to school, what the names of his parents are, who his sisters are. But then we get to the hospital, and Prof is getting quite grumpy. Lots of patients. We walk in, he sits right next to me and he looks at my notes every time I make a note. So obviously I don't make many notes, and I don't speak the language of the people that I see. So he's getting annoyed by that. And on the other hand, well, it's just flying through patients. It's like diagnosis, treatment. The patients are loving him, and he's just but so Hoffman is also getting a bit annoyed at that. So he starts probing him. It's like, Maritz or Laubscher, what's the diagnosis? Boof, comes the answer. He's what's the treatment here? Boof, comes the answer. Give me the classification. A, B, C, D. Measure this. And he brings out the goniometer, which has never happened in a registrar. So he gets angry, and you can see his mouth starts to, Prof. Hoffman has got this thing when he gets angry, his mouth starts to flicker, and it's like, you stand in the corner. So Maritz gets up, walks to the corner, and he stands in the corner. And now he's looking at me and he's looking at Hoffman, and Hoffman says, now you have to turn around. He had to turn around, stand in the corner, facing the corner for an hour. All the patients are walking past, all wondering what's going on. And Hoffman is just winking and giving him. So that's actually the only time I see Maritz stand in the corner. So most of the time he's actually at the center of what activities we have in the department. As you saw, he's really the motor. He brings people in. He lifts people up that are next to him. He never leads from the front. He's always someone that leads by example. And that's why people like working with him. So you can see how all of these things have grown just from a paper on hydatid disease. Now there's a huge trial happening that is unheard of and unseen in Southern Africa. And that's all basically him walking the field every day, plowing on, motivating people. Last story. We are now at the end of our reg time, and our wives have told us they want to stay in Cape Town. So we need to make it happen. Obviously, there's going to have to be some shoulder rubbing and ass kissing with our person that makes the decisions. Best way, because the way you get FaceTime with Rob is on a hunting trip. So his dad and his mom invited us over for a beautiful stay at their home, and also in a game farm or a game farm that they have. I have never shot a gun. And you can see that even on this picture, I look completely out of place. They didn't even give me a gun for the picture. So yeah, we get there, and Maritz and I he's holding his ears, and I'm like, I've get a .22, and this thing has got such a recoil for me, It's like, and obviously I didn't hit him. And so Maritz, what he does when he just rubs his face like this. And he says, Michael, don't worry. We just go out into the bush. So we walk into the field, and it gets, denser and denser. And so we have to kind of walk more hunched, and eventually we leopard crawling. I've never leopard crawled anywhere. And he's like, Michael, can you see there? And I'm looking. I'm like, I can't see anything. No, he's not. Okay, no, come. We walk and we leopard crawl to the thing, and this is how Maritz sees it, Yeah. So he's now. As I sit there and I've got my .22 in my hand and I'm just shaking, and he's like, wait. And all of a sudden, this thing turns and looks at us, and he's now skid. Now, bam! I shoot, and obviously, this thing, I don't know how it happened. It was so close, but it went right over it. It just looked around and bounced away. And again, Maritz. It's like, Michael, don't worry. That buck will be waiting for you. Even his dad always comes, and whenever he sees me, he says, Michael, don't worry. Your buck is still out there running around. But when I see Maritz in the meetings with the registrars, it's a very similar atmosphere. He wants them to find it, and he leopard crawls through all the signs and symptoms with them. And finally, they stand in front of the X-ray, and he's like, "Can you see it, Weiband? Can you see it?" And you know, yeah, I can see it. No, so what is it? And then he gives him a one answer question, like, it is a hip fracture, and then he wants a word. So I was like, skid. And they give him the word, and it's like, don't worry. So yeah, but actually, I think when you look at Maritz and how he works, I think that's his core. That's where he's, I think, happiest. It's also where he wants, that's his priority. His absolute priority is to improve people around him, to train people up into surgeons that are also good people. And I think whenever you see him frustrated in all of those meetings, I think that's because that's his most important thing. Maritz, am I right? We always speak about it, and he says, "No, I have to do the CMSA president because obviously, like, why are you doing this?" And no, Michael, it's good because we need good orthopedic surgeons. And so, lastly, my voice is hopefully not going to break, but it's equally important to us as a department to honor and recognize his family. So, all of you, Baladine, you've got the strings in the hand at home. And I often speak to him, and he obviously appreciates all the hard work at home, and all of the support. And that goes for, we've got a little thank you from our department for you as well, Baladine, because it's because it's not just it's his own success; it's the success of the family. So Marco got a tie. Those ties are only for surgeons that make it into the rotation, Marco. So, and by the way, you can also swap it. We, as a department of orthopedic surgery, Prof. Lionel Thompson, we made a choice that you can swap things. You can wear ties or you can wear scarves. It's up to you. But anyway, the tie goes to Marco and a scarf to Mia. So the entire family, thank you very much for supporting him, for being there for him. For us, he's a massive, obviously, like you've seen, a massive force in our department. And I know that you're supporting him and that you're there for him at home, and which we really appreciate. Maritz, thank you very much from all of us.
Maritz, baie dankie vir hierdie inwydingsrede wat jy nou gedoen het. 'n Inwydingsrede hier in die fakulteit is 'n gemeenskaplike geleentheid. Dit is 'n geleentheid waar ons saamkom, waar ons die eer toedien aan 'n mens wat nou 'n professor geword het. Maar vanaand het ons gehoor hoe belangrik die idee van spanwerk is. En ek dink in die fakulteit dis 'n ding wat ons probeer om elke dag meer en meer te ervaar. Baie dankie aan Baladine and Mia and Marco. Whenever I say thank you to families at an occasion like this, it's really recognizing that we very seldom bring families formally into the university space. And so when you do come, and your parents and parents-in-law, Maritz, really to say thank you that you give the service that you do, because it's the one occasion where we recognize that our scholars are only scholars because they come from places that allow them to do the things that they do. And so thanks very much for that. Let me also just recognize the head of Department of Surgery, into which the Division of Orthopedics falls. Professor Cancross is here. And Dr. Belinda Jacobs, I saw, is the medical manager from the Groote Schuur Hospital. So thanks for being here. It's an interesting thing, some of the things I learned from Maritz this evening, and as an anesthetist, one is constantly learning from orthopedic surgeons. Not as much as I've done this evening, but yeah, here we are. Thank you very much for this translation of and reading your application for the ADHOM, and I think it's 2 years ago now. Reading the portfolio written in paper, and again, a very extensive portfolio reflecting all of those achievements across those 4 domains, this service, research, and the leadership and management parts of it, and the social responsiveness. But in watching you translate those bland papers into a living story and the cobbling together of so many experiences, I'm recognizing that one can't live in assumptions all the time. So every time I come to the lecture of an orthopedic surgeon, I'm quite struck at the full breadth of professorship that we are privileged to have in the university. So thank you for that. And I say that, Maritz, because I had a very uncomfortable encounter just before we came in, where in greeting a male and female couple, I did assume the male to be the orthopedic surgeon. And I have to say, I'm embarrassed to say that I recognize my own assumptions in the stories that I tell. But there are a couple of things that I'll take away from tonight, like surgeons always believe that they're right. And I suppose that's some of the discomfort of being an anesthetist in this theater of an orthopedic surgeon, or any kind of surgeon for that matter. But then you went on to say, surgeons can be told what to do. And that was quite profound for me. I'll be quoting that a few times in the future. But I think the real power of your presentation today is that you really place orthopedics at the service of our people. And for me, that's really the greatest signal of the scholarship that you've brought to your discipline. And thank you very much for that. When you speak, it is very clear that professors are not made by research alone. They're made by the things that build community, whether within the families that they come from, the families into which they come as the scholarly clinical community, but also the families into which you come as a nation. And so there is a debt of great gratitude to you for the stories that you tell. Importantly, though, in the stories that you tell, and I've said that more than once, is that sometimes we do the work that we do because our people are so sick. And when you speak about the impact of violence on people and the recurrent injury, it's something that we must leave here reflecting on, because it's something that we've got to continue to work out ways of how we change the world. I shared, Michael, your reflections on the hunting. I can't imagine what I would do out in the field trying to hunt. But this evening, and inaugural lectures in general, are really this intersection between the story the scholar has told and the promise that the scholar makes in terms of continuing to do the work that they do. And I'm reminded each time I come to these spaces, Jomo Kenyatta, who was the first president of Kenya, is attributed the saying, and I quote, "Sometimes we can spend the time telling the stories of the histories of our heroes of old, or we can become architects of our shared future." And so thank you very much for your lecture, which promises both of those things, a recognition of the stories that you've told, but really what I'm seeing is the promise of where we can go in terms of the work that you're doing. So, enkosi kakhulu, kaisikai kangans. Thank you. Please stand. Please stand as the procession leaves, and then join us for refreshments outside.
In this place of the stars.